Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We've got George Conway back with us today. We'll chat with George in just a moment, but first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So George Conway is an attorney, political activist, and legal and political commentator, and a founder of the Lincoln Project. He is a host of the Bulwark's podcast, George Conway Explains It All, to Sarah Longwell, and he is a contributing writer to The Atlantic. He previously worked as a litigator for 3 decades at the law firm of Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen Katz in New York City. George, welcome back into the back room.
Happy to be here, Andy.
So let's start with a macro question. What keeps George Conway up at night most these days? And don't say acid reflux.
Well, would there be any difference between that and the current administration? I don't know. Nothing really keeps me up, because if I would be kept up now, then it would be, would not have been sleeping for the last 6 years.
Right.
So I think it's that maybe I'm the frog boiling in the pot, because it just doesn't keep me up anymore. But I have lots of things that, I joked that before we went on about what could bring this podcast. Do I have a hard stop, and it could be the end of the republic, and that could happen. It's not that I'm resigned to it, but I think that the thing that would keep me up at night, if somebody were keeping me up at night, would be, the end of the republic. Yeah, I do think that Trump is capable of causing everything to come down. And we don't know exactly how he would do it, but he's a uniquely destructive force with a uniquely destructive, malevolent personality, and he has acquired a great deal of power, obviously. And when history shows that when people like that get to the highest reaches of government and control militaries, and in this case nuclear weapons, things can be changed irrevocably and damaged irrevocably. And he's done an incalculable amount of damage in just a few short months.
So let's stick with that for a second and look at it from the perspective of just the last 9 months. So we had an election, obviously leading up to that election, guys like you and me, a lot of people were like, oh my God, if this guy gets elected again, we're screwed. He's going to do this.
We're not even up to 9 months since the election. That's the scary thing.
Well, right. I mean, speaking from my own personal perspective, my feelings today.
Seems like 9 years.
10 years, actually. Okay, so he won. He got into office January 20th. We've seen the first few months of the chaos with Doge. We've seen him testing the boundaries of our democracy. We've seen the courts and how they've responded to it. We've seen what's going on in LA with the National Guard and the Marines, which I want to get into with you in a little bit in more detail. But so now we have some perspective. We have like the first 6 months of 2.0. Is it what you expected? Is it worse than you expected? Is it way worse than you expected?
It's about what I expected. Overall, in the overall assessment of bad, it is pretty much what I expected. There were aspects of it, there were wrinkles of it that I didn't expect. Some things happened in different order than I would have expected. But by and large, he's doing what I thought he would do, which was basically be as lawless as possible at all times, and to basically ignore statutes, ignore constitutional provisions, declare himself to be the arbiter of everything, and end up in court a lot. And the question is going to be, ultimately, it's still out there, is whether or not, when push comes to shove, he's going to basically tell the courts to F off and ignore the rulings of the courts. He's substantively, as a practical matter, doing that in a lot of circumstances. But are we going to get to the point where, in addition to his lawlessness affecting whether or not he follows the edicts of Congress, for example, appropriations bills and so on and so forth, or the provisions governing the use of the National Guard, and so on and so forth, or the provisions of the Alien Enemies Act or the Immigration and Naturalization Act. He's basically just rewriting those or ignoring the provisions he doesn't like, or interpreting them, or in ways that are inconsistent with their text, or basically saying, I'm the president and this is a matter of national emergency and the Congress can't tell me what to do. Whether he's going to do that ultimately explicitly with the courts in the same way, I think he will. I think he's getting there. I think right now he's at the dog ate our homework stage of disobedience to the court. But when he gets there, that is when all bets are off. And that is where I think he ultimately, I think I said this, I think that's ultimately where he was going to go. And I thought that's where we are going. And the things that I think are different than what I expected were, I didn't anticipate Doge. I don't think we really saw that coming until after the election. Also didn't, predict the demise of Doge. The tariffs, yes, we knew he was going to go into tariffs. The exact tacoing back and forth is not something we precisely saw, but he has done damage to the economy nonetheless, and probably will still do damage to the economy as a result of tariffs. He'll probably come back to that at some point. And I think the immigration aspect, I thought he'd get to that a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. And he really didn't get to, it took him 2 or 3 months to ramp that up. I think the problem is the reason why they're engaging in some of the showy activity now, and it's become much more lawless than it was before, is because they couldn't get the numbers up early enough. And I think that's what's led to some of the activity now. So, things unfolded a bit differently than I thought, but the overall theme of him being lawless and being arbitrary, that's right on schedule. And the destructive tendency, ultimately there was going to be a foreign affairs crisis. He was lucky he avoided that mostly during his first term. And here we are.
Yeah, I want to talk with you about that too in a minute. But, you mentioned Taco. Taco, as prescribed by Wall Street, is that he chickens out when it comes to the tariffs. You mentioned that as well.
Yeah.
But can we apply that to other things? Will he chicken out of just about everything? Because that's who he is in his DNA?
Yes. For a couple of reasons. And there are two separate strands here in the way I look at it. One is that he's a coward and a bully. Those things go together, right? And he's a physical coward, owns spurs and whatnot. He's a moral coward. He can't face up to his own mistakes and wrongs. He's a coward when it comes to firing people. He doesn't do it in person. He does it by tweet. The only time he ever fires anybody in person is on The Apprentice. So he is, Taco does reflect that cowardly aspect of the bully's personality. But there's also another aspect to it. He's a narcissistic sociopath, as many people have heard me say so many times over the last 6 years. And one of the things about sociopaths is that they are completely impulsive, or mostly impulsive. It's one of the characteristics of sociopaths is they don't really engage in a lot of analytical thinking. They just do it. They just act. Mm-hmm. They act on impulse. And Trump actually has, over the years, prided himself on his instinct. I just do things by instinct. He doesn't calculate things out, and he can't really, because even though he was a businessman, he can't do math. He doesn't know fractions. He's terrible at it. But he acts on his whims. And we see that so many times in so many different ways. It's one of the things that people used to talk about at the Trump organization in his first term is the last person he's talked to often has the most influence on what he does. And so you want to be the last person to talk to him before he tweets something or before he goes out and speaks to something. And one of the other aspects that relates to that, to the impulsiveness, is he's also, he's a narcissistic sociopath and he loves control, right? Dictators are like that. Stalin was like that. Stalin used to love to basically tell somebody who was putting them to death and then grant them a reprieve and say, they would say, thank you, Joseph. Thank you for whatever they call the whatever they called Stalin. And that's what it is. That's one of the things he likes about being president. It's one of the things he likes about pardons. It's one of the things he likes about tariffs is he gets to jerk everybody around and then say, okay, no more.
Right.
Now be thankful to me. He likes, it's that same thing about creates crises.
Yes, the arsonist who puts out the
The
fire.
arsonist, and he puts out the fire and say, you should thank me for putting out the fire that I set.
Right.
Okay. And it's like that. We see it in every aspect of his behavior. We see it in foreign policy. One day he's saying that they need to evacuate Tehran. The next day he's saying to giving everybody 2 weeks. Okay. And who knows what he's going to say tomorrow? The 2 weeks may be up tomorrow or not. And the tariffs were exactly that way. He loved, the announcement of making it's like, I am imposing tariffs. I, the most powerful person in the world, are imposing tariffs.
Liberation Day.
Liberation Day. And now I'm going to unliberate you by reducing the tariff. And then I'm going to change some of them for some countries. Come to me, worship me, make a deal, suck up to me.
90 deals in 90 days, right?
Great Britain and Northern Ireland, right? So it's all, none of it has any substance. None of it has any
It's all
strategy. Mm-hmm. It's all performative, and it's all about assuaging his ego in the moment.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what he's all about. And that's, on the one sense, it makes him comical, right? It's like, it's just like you watch him and he's saying one crazy thing and the next crazy thing, and he does the opposite and he contradicts himself. And it's, it's great for Jimmy Kimmel and whoever who's making fun of him,
right,
or me or you. On the other hand, when it comes to actually firing off missiles and actually restraining trade and like this affects people's lives.
Sure.
But that doesn't hurt to him. It's like I remember how after the election, he checked out after the 2020 election, and you had the president's daily schedule, and there was like many meetings and phone calls, many meetings and phone calls, many meetings and phone calls. It's like, it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? It's all just arbitrary. It's all whimsical. It's all completely unserious, except that, this guy's playing with live ammo.
Yeah. Let's get back to Iran for a second. If you watch the news, everybody's like, well, but he made, no wars the centerpiece of his campaign. Isn't this going to upset MAGA?
I do think there are going to be people who will be very upset with him about that because they truly are isolationists.
So we're seeing it now, like the Tucker Carlson stuff.
We are
Ted
seeing
Cruz
it.
was amazing.
The other thing to remember, the other factor to consider, though, is that first of all, there is no principles. There are no principles to MAGAism. Okay, there are no principles to Donald Trump. There are no principles to support of Donald Trump because they basically serve to justify everything that he does. But on the other hand, to the extent there are philosophical strains that actually exist, there are two. And they run side by side on the political right, and for MAGA in particular. One is a kind of isolationism. The other is Islamophobia. And, those two are in conflict here.
Yeah.
And then there's also another strain, which is the belief that the second coming will occur if Armageddon occurs in the Middle East, which that's a whole other
episode.
That's a whole other episode.
So
yeah.
Well, there's two things that happened last Saturday, which I consider to be two very significant, consequential events. One was his abject failure in his military birthday show.
You didn't like it?
No. No, I did. I loved seeing the empty bleachers. I fucking love that. But, and at the same time...
How hard is it to fill up like a couple hundred seats in front of the cameras? They're good at that. That's what they're normally.
He's a producer.
At, right?
You're a TV producer.
Like, for a rally, right? They always have these people like, they may look bored sometimes, but they're sitting there with their MAGA hats. It's like, that's the place where you wanted to put people, and they couldn't even do that.
I mean, the image of tanks going by in front of empty bleachers was very, very telling. And at the same time that was happening, millions of people across this country were protesting in the No Kings protests. And I think those two things, the juxtaposition of those two things, if I want to be optimistic.
Yeah, no, it was very heartening. I found it heartening.
It says
also.
something that his autocratic attempts, and he's pushing this envelope as hard as he can, as far as he can, like no one has ever.
Sir.
But at the same time he's doing that, we are starting to see a resistance movement in this country. Like, if that continues, what it's saying is, we're not hungry. We're not Turkey. We're not going to just lie down after 249 years and let this schmuck turn us into an autocracy. So I think what happened Saturday was really telling.
I don't disagree. I mean, it gave me great hope. Now, the problem is that more of this will happen, and he will become more and more frustrated with it. And then what does he do? Does he double down on everything he's doing? Double down on the lawlessness? Double down on the use of domestic force? He does double down on things. And then what happens?
Well, let's stick with the domestic.
That's the thing. And to go back to your original question, what keeps me up at night? Mm-hmm. What would keep me up at night? And this was something I said, I think, I said this in 2019. It's like the danger of his reelection in 2020 would be basically civil disorder.
Yeah.
Because the country would become, I felt that if you remain president, the country could become ungovernable. And that's the big danger of where we are today. Yes, there is there's a budding resistance movement. Yes, 5 million people showed up. But does that lead immediately to a restored normal democracy, or does it lead in the interim to a country that's ungovernable?
Yeah.
That's the worrisome thing about it, but I don't know that we have a choice.
Yeah. So let's look at the subject you're talking about a little further. So we see what's going on in L.A. He federalized the National Guard, sent in the Marines without the request or consent of Governor Gavin Newsom. Last night, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals gave him a huge victory. What do you think happens with that case going forward? Because there seems to be so many different options. There's a hearing happening today with Judge Breyer in the district court, although that seems kind of moot at this point. Newsom could also request a full 11-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit to review this case. It may also find its way up to the Supreme Court.
I don't think this case is going to be the case that becomes the important and critical case, even in this area of the use of National Guards or military forces within the borders of the United States. And the reason why I think that is, first of all, there are actually some good things for the state of California in that opinion last night. I think overall it's wrong and misguided in fundamental respects. I could go through a legal analysis, which I did for my own podcast just a little while ago. But, there is room in that opinion for, what the Ninth Circuit did yesterday is it basically said we have to defer to the president on the fundamental question, not the fundamental question, but the triggering question of whether or not the statute allows him to federalize the National Guard if, and this is one of the prongs, if the president determines that he is unable to execute the laws through the use of regular forces. And the district court held, well, that's bullshit, because there's no evidence in the record that ICE was prevented from actually doing anything. Yes, they got held up. Yes, people were throwing stuff at them. Yes, the streets were blocked, but there's no indication that they were actually unable to haul people away in the way that they have clearly been doing on television. And the Court of Appeals said, well, we don't know whether really unable means unable. These, two Trump appointees who are supposed to be employing the text as it is written of a statute, but let's leave that aside. But they're basically saying we have to defer to the president's assessment. But they also said we don't have to completely defer to the president's assessment. They kind of talked out of both sides of their mouth using Supreme Court precedents. And the second thing they said is, well, we're assuming good faith. We're assuming that there isn't arbitrary fiat We're assuming that there's a factual basis. Like, all of these things are inconsistent with Donald Trump. Arbitrary fiat. Thy name is Donald Trump. And so, I mean, what's happening here is that we're seeing a clash in the law that goes beyond these individual fights. And what it is that historically and normally, and this goes through Democratic and Republican administrations and Democratic and Republican judges, the government gets sort of a presumption that it's behaving lawfully and normally. Mm-hmm. And people call that, it's not a real presumption in the sense that it's a legal doctrine, but people call it the presumption of regularity. The notion that the president's actually trying to do his job in the best way he can. And yes, sometimes he goes too far. Yes, sometimes he makes mistakes. Yes, sometimes he doesn't follow the law the way he should, and we have to correct that. But by and large, he's not a fucking lunatic, and he's not lying his ass off. Okay? The problem with law and litigation in this environment, the other problem is that, how you enforce court orders, we'll set that one aside, is that this presumption makes no sense in a world where Donald Trump is president of the United States. And so that's what happened last night with the Ninth Circuit, is the Ninth Circuit is still applying this concept of good faith. The president's acting in good faith and with a rational basis and is not engaging in just arbitrary oppressive behavior. Okay. Which Donald Trump is capable of doing nothing but that.
Right.
Okay. And so what we're seeing in some of this litigation, and we saw with the Supreme Court in an Alien Enemies Act case recently, where basically the Trump administration got slammed because the Supreme Court, in its short emergency opinion, basically let everyone know, like, we don't like what's going on here. This doesn't look really kosher, and we kind of feel like we're being lied to, although they didn't quite say that. And so at some point in these cases, with regard to the National Guard cases, they're going to go too far. And the courts are going to say, no way, no how, by any stretch of the imagination can this be perceived as good faith. Now, the problem with this current case right now is this isn't the right case to present that, because what happened was, yes, he did federalize this National Guard. Yes, he probably did it procedurally incorrectly. Yes, he probably didn't have the legal basis. But at the end of the day, it's over, kind of, right now, at least in this one circumstance. What he did with the California National Guard was, again, as so much of what he does, it was performative, right? He wasn't doing this because he was unable to enforce the laws. He was doing it to put on a show.
Yep.
All right. And so it's hard to say, going to be hard to get the Supreme Court to, which has a limited amount of capital to spend on this, because it's only a court, doesn't have armies, doesn't have police officers, to say, this is the case where we're going to really go to head to head with the executive branch. Because right now, not that much is happening using these troops. They were trotted out. They had to sleep on the floors because they didn't have hotel rooms for them. And maybe there was like one arrest that was alleged on TV or something. But by and large, they didn't do anything, right? They were just there for show. I think the case that's going to really present the issue have yet to be filed. That's my view. And I kind of hope that this case kind of ends right now as it is, and that the fight be deferred for another day when the administration actually does something with the troops that's completely outrageous. Which it will.
The concern is that
that makes sense.
Yes, and the concern is that he may have perceived last night's ruling as license to now do this same thing in every other state on whatever whims he follows, True. And that may be the inflection point that you're talking about, where he goes too far.
Well, it yes and no. I mean, the fact of the matter is, even if he had lost, he's still going to do it. And even if he wins, he treats that as we end up in the same place. It's the question of, I think, ultimately, what he does with these troops. All right. Does he use these troops for show,
right,
as he did here, or do we have a Kent State? I hate to say it, at a no kings rally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. That's where the rubber could hit the road. And again, that's the stuff that, if I were low on sleep because I were going to stay up all night about everything, which I can't do because I physically can't do it, that's what I'd be up.
No,
Sleepless.
we all need our beauty sleep, George.
Yeah, I can't. I'm just too old for it.
And so one of a point of distinction in that ruling, well, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is that the court had a fundamental disagreement with him over his claims that the court has no business in these types of cases. Yeah. And the court said no. Yeah. And to your point, the court said, as long as you don't act like a madman, we're deferring to you. But if you do,
I mean, in essence, that's
right.
what they did.
Yeah.
I mean, they rejected two arguments that the government made that basically said you can't look into this. One was this thing called the political question doctrine, which they're overusing. It's just a political question doctrine is something that says that, if the Constitution commits something entirely into the discretion of the political branch, you can't touch it. But that's just rarely applies to anything. The other is that, this statute in and of itself confers unlimited discretion to the president. They did argue that, and the court rightly rejected that. Now, it said that the president has extremely broad discretion, but as I said, they said, well, as long as the president's kind of acting in good faith. And so what could happen here is that they could go back to the district court, and there could be fact-finding, right? There could be fact-finding. There could be some discovery, and maybe there'd be more flesh on the bones of what you and I and any sentient and rational and intelligent human being knows that this is all bullshit, that there was really not a basis to invoke the National Guard here because they were still enforcing the law. But, there could be more meat on that bones, and we could end up with relitigating this case and going back up to the Court of Appeals, or they could take it en banc and they go up to the Supreme Court. But as I said, this isn't, I think if I were, look, as a litigator, one of the things you do is, if you have a portfolio of cases, I mean, the Thurgood Marshall did this with the school desegregation cases when he was the head lawyer for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. You pick your best case. You bring a bunch of cases, you're going to have a bunch of cases, and some cases just are better and more compelling because their factual circumstances are better. And I think there will be, I hate to say it because it could mean tragedy on the streets, but there are going to be better cases to litigate this.
Well, let me present a different scenario to you because you are also a political guy and you understand politics really well. Gavin Newsom has had a moment. He has, to a point, met that moment. To Gavin Newsom, this case may mean something very different politically. Is he compelled to push? Right. Is he compelled to push this as far as he can, so that hopefully at the end of the day, whatever that day is or what it looks like, he's the winner and not the loser for 2028?
Yes, you're absolutely right there. I mean, I'm my prior series of answers is looking at it like if I am the mastermind of the legal litigation world, I am, orchestrating events in a way that I think would be best for the Republic. It might not be this case, but you're absolutely right. I mean, Gavin Newsom, who clearly has strong political ambitions, and I think he did a lot for himself, those political ambitions in the last several days to burnish his credentials in that regard, because he really stood up to Trump in a way that it wasn't clear that he was going to from some of the other things he'd done. He's got to figure out a way to be able to maneuver this case to a point where he can declare victory. I absolutely agree with that. Or else, if he just drops the case and says, "Well, we're not going to go farther," he's going to look like he caved. Mm-hmm. And that is a little bit of a trap for him. I just hope he wins.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if he litigates and loses, at least he can say he fought the good fight, and then he can still fight on other grounds, and there'll be other things that will happen that will put him in conflict with the administration, clearly, especially on immigration, since it seems to be that California seems to be a target. I guess maybe it's Stephen Miller trying to get revenge on everybody he grew up with in California, or and there's a lot at stake because, I mean, truth be told, the economy of the state of California depends on the labor of legal and illegal migrants.
So in our final few minutes, let's talk about the Trump-Musk romance breakup.
Oh, a broken romance makes me very sad.
Tell us,
Doesn't make
George.
me,
Why are you upset
well,
about it?
it's sad to see people who,
Formerly in
people,
love.
it's sad.
Um,
Anyway,
are you surprised by how nasty it got?
no. I mean, look, you have two volatile, narcissistic sociopaths. Okay. And, at some point they were going to conflict. They both have very, very similar tendencies. They both seek maximal control over things. They both are delusional. Sooner or later, they were going to conflict. It was just a question of when. And so I wasn't really that surprised. I wasn't really willing to put a time frame on it because, they needed each other, and they still kind of have needed each other. And to some extent, they're kind of, in their similarity, they're dangerous to each other.
Totally.
Because look at how did Trump take over the Republican Party? Basically, because people were afraid of him. Because Trump will do things that are destructive to himself to destroy others, right? He could take down the entire Republican Party if too many people stood up with him. He would take down the entire Republican Party if too many people stood up to him. After January 6th, even Mitch McConnell said it in his floor speech after the impeachment acquittal in 2021. Trump lost the election and he tried to basically burn everything on the way out. Okay, the thing that makes Trump dangerous is he doesn't give a shit, right? He'll blow himself up to blow you up.
That's the sociopath part you mentioned before.
That's the sociopath part, right? It's the last days in the bunker. It's the telling Albert Speer to destroy all the bridges.
Wait, you mean in that last moment he's not going to go? But wait, what about Ivanka and Eric and Junior?
Oh, Junior.
That's not going to be a thought in his head?
So much about Junior. Yeah.
All right, Junior. Okay. Eric maybe, but not Junior.
Right. So the problem is, the Republican Party hitched themselves to this sociopath who could destroy them, who was willing to basically take everything down, including them, with him. And Trump similarly did that with Musk. And Musk is capable of doing exactly that. And that's and there were shades of that. We saw part of that. He's talking about what's in the Epstein files. It's like, I don't know what's in the Epstein files. I'd like to know.
But he's had a bit of a mea culpa. He's made overtures. Like he seems to be like, if this was high school, he's the one trying to get back together,
He is.
Can that ever happen?
Right now, it seems like he's deferring to the senior sociopath on the watch, right? It's kind of like the Smith Lords. They kind of act in tandem, and one is kind of in charge at any given moment. And the other one is looking for the chance to take out the first Lord. Right now, that's where it is right now. But these guys, they're arbitrary, they're capricious, they are whimsical, they are impulsive. How long is this going to? We don't know. This may not be the last word.
Yeah. Just to play this out, Elon Musk could say something like, as he's done, I'm sorry, I may have said things that are bad. But is Trump capable of going, hey, that dude basically called me a pedophile and a sex trafficker? Is he able to get beyond that ever? I don't think so.
Look, part of me agrees with you. Part of me, he's purely transactional.
Yeah.
Right? Purely in the moment. Okay. And he has a long memory. Today he's wailing on about the 2020 election and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, we've seen so many people fall out of favor and he get into fights with them. And then sooner they come groveling back, or he decides he finally needs them. And they come back. Steve Bannon was seen going into the White House this week. Mm-hmm. I read somewhere. All right. There are a lot of people who are just, you would think they're done with, that Trump was done with them because at some point he was done with them, and yet they come back.
Yeah, it is. a fascinating psychological study.
It's like, it's sort of like, this is the way it is with sociopaths and mob bosses. Sometimes, I wouldn't turn my back on them, right? On either of them. But, sometimes the mob bosses get into fights, they try to whack each other, and then they do business.
Yeah.
I mean, we are not sociopaths. We can't fully appreciate how that, that camaraderie among sociopaths works. But, truth is that just they go off and on sometimes. I don't think
that is such a good point you're making, George, because this is why I throw my shoe at the TV all the time. It's because when you watch the mainstream media and they analyze things he's done today or said today, like, why would he do that? Why would he say, like, it's because he's a sociopath. Like you can't look at him through the lens that we look at each other.
Yes.
He's nuts. He's out of his fucking mind, and he has no idea what he's doing. That's why he says these things.
This is why I've been banging this. Everybody's like, well, psychology stuff is mushy and blah blah blah. No, it's not. This isn't advanced psychology. This is high school psychology. This is easy stuff, okay? Narcissists and sociopaths, okay? They're hard to deal with. They're almost impossible to deal with. But once you know what they are, what defines them, you can pick them out. Oh. If you have any common sense whatsoever. And the thing about it is like, what you just pointed out is the one thing that drives me nuts is they're always looking for the 15-dimensional chess analysis. Oh, he's doing this because then he's going to move his piece there, and then he's going to...
What's his end goal?
And then his end game, and then... It's like, no, right? I mean, there was this great quote during his first term by some Trump aides, like, no, he's not playing 17-dimensional chess. He's just eating the pieces. And that's what he does. And that's the thing. It's like, the press continually tries to make sense of what
they're normalizing him. They're still normalizing him.
The only way to make sense of what Donald Trump does is through the narcissism and the sociopathy. Okay, Iran. Take Iran, for example. What does he care about there? Does he care about the interests of the United States?
No.
No. Does he care about the Jewish God?
No.
No. Does he care about the Jewish people?
Nope.
No. Does he care about peace?
Nope.
No. He cares about two things, or one thing, about how he feels is what he cares about.
And how he looks.
And the ways he can feel good. One is by being all powerful and dropping a bomb on somebody, or by being the peacemaker who everybody says thank you to, and he gets a Nobel Peace Prize. Those are what drives him.
Yep.
Okay? And what the last person who's talking to him says that pushes him to thinking that if I do this, I will get to one of those two places, or both. I dropped the bomb on them, and then there was peace forevermore, and I am the greatest person in history. And people will come and worship me and say, oh, thank you. Here's another 747. Thank you. Thank you. Okay? That's how he thinks. Okay? It's not, do we have the bunker? Is it like, if we drop the bunker busting bombs on this mountain, are we really going to take out the centrifuges? Okay, that's too much for him. That's too much for him. So that's one aspect. Okay, it's never about chess. It's never about actions and consequences. The other aspect about it is like there was this article yesterday on MSNBC.com by the guy who writes the Maddow blog. And he's a smart guy. He writes good stuff. I think his name is Steve Bannon. I may have the name wrong. And he was saying, why is Trump lying about his approval ratings? And he wrote, basically, he's doing that because he wants to be influential. It's like, well, I guess he does want to be influential, but he's doing it not because he thinks, if I convince everybody my approval ratings are at 70%, people will listen to me. And therefore, I can persuade them of the things I believe in. It's like, no, that's not how Donald Trump works. Donald Trump says his approval rating is at 99%, like he used to say, like, I have 96% of all votes, because it makes him feel good.
Yeah, because he's crazy.
He lies to himself. He lies to himself because he's so insecure. His, narcissists are insecurities. Insecure people. They think he's crippled by insecurity, except to the extent they can lie themselves out of it by saying, I'm the greatest person in the world. And if no, you don't appreciate it, poor me, and I will get even with you.
Yeah.
Okay? What it's about. It's nothing more complicated than that. It's purely impulsive, emotional at all moments. There's no reason to it.
And that's what I wish. That's what I wish the media would discuss.
That's what people don't. That's what people don't understand. The psychology stuff is important for that reason.
Absolutely. Maybe he wouldn't be president now if we were having the kind of conversations. You
understand Donald Trump and what he does until you accept that he is a textbook malignant narcissist or narcissistic sociopath.
Well, a lot of people don't want to
understand that. He makes perfect sense.
Yes,
right?
but most people can't go there.
You may not be able to predict what he does from one moment to the next, but you can predict the range of things that he will do, and that he will do the opposite or something else the next day. And it actually nonsense makes sense if you understand his psychology.
Yeah, well, I think CNN and MSNBC would have to go off the air about 23 hours of the 24-hour day if they did that, because every subject would be like, because he's crazy, he's a sociopath, that's it. Next subject.
He's nuts, he's a sociopath. This is what sociopaths do, and we've never, for some reason, we're 10 years into this now, basically, and
still doing the same things.
Still doing the same thing. It's crazy.
Yeah. Last quick question, more of a prediction. Who's going to be the first to go? Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, or Bobby Kennedy Jr.?
It's really hard. I think it was going to be either.
They're all so deserving, right? That's what makes it hard.
No, I think it's probably going to be. It's either going to be Hegseth or Tulsi.
Yeah, I think Tulsi.
Hegseth, because he's just trouble, right? And everything is just chaos over the Pentagon. You can't have that. And he's embarrassing. So that's the argument for him to go first. The problem, the thing with Tulsi is, her problem is, even if she tries to lay low, she's there in the White House. So that's what's her, so I think the problem with Hegseth is he actually has to run the world's largest military and the world's largest employer, civilian and uniform. So he can't really hide. Tulsi can't hide. It's hard to hide because she's actually in the West Wing. She has this nice corner office on the same floor as the president. But if she closes the door and tries to stay out of trouble, she may have a better chance.
Yeah, but Trump on that plane saying, I don't care what she says, that's not a good thing.
Yeah, that's not good. I mean, she just has to go in there, and I think she has to do is stay out of his line of sight for a while, and then go in, and I hate to say this, I know it sounds sexist, but it's really not about her. Go in and look pretty.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's the truth.
Say,
with him.
Mr. President, you are so wonderful. You're the most. Do an Alina Habba, okay? And then she'll have a chance. So I think she, as I talk this through, I think she has the better chance, but she has to shut her mouth and kiss up to him, which she can do. That's big, and she has an opportunity to do that because she's actually. But don't go in there too much.
Yeah.
You can't be overexposed. You don't want to go in there in the wrong moment. You want to go in there. First of all, she should go on TV and say the president is the most brilliant person on earth. That's the one thing you should do. She should do. Mm-hmm. And to say that, do that and say, and then, but lay low at the same time.
To her credit, and I don't give her much credit, but to her credit, I don't think she has it in her to be able to do that. That's part of her problem with him. Which is why I think she's the first.
I know some people she should talk to that might keep advice on that. But anyway.
Yeah. And with Bobby Kennedy Jr.
I think he's going to last. I think Kennedy's going to last, because he's not doing anything that he cares about right now.
Yeah, but don't you think there's only one thing that could be more exciting to Trump than hiring a Kennedy, and that's firing a Kennedy? That's like the Mitt Romney at the lunch table photo. You remember that humiliating thing? Like, we know that Trump loves to humiliate people.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think I would bet that Bobby stays there the longest. Mm-hmm. So, but that being said, it's like you don't know with the arbitrary wheel spinning that goes on in the man's head every morning. Donald's head is like which spot he's going to land on.
Bobby can put out a video tomorrow that he ate a squirrel. And boom, that's it. He's gone.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
George, always a pleasure, always insightful, always a lot of fun. Come back again soon.
All right. Talk to you.
Take care. This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg, and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Langell. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.